What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the UCF Knights. UCF, of course, a team coming off a pretty rough year last year, and then also kind of a disappointing season, going just 4-8 overall. So yeah, 4-8 in 2024. A lot of people were kind of expecting UCF to be a better team than that, and I kind of thought the same thing. I thought this team had a potential chance to be a dark horse team in the Big 12, but they obviously did not exceed those expectations looking at 2025. Before we get into the predictions, my thoughts on this team. Obviously, Gus Malzahn goes on to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State, so you lose him, but you bring back Scott Frost, of course a guy that's been here before, but it was at the Group of 5 level, so this time he's playing, or actually like coaching a Power 4 school instead of like a Group of 5 team and UCF. So how is that going to play out? Which Scott Frost are we going to get? Are we going to get the Scott Frost from Nebraska that lost a lot of close games? Or are we going to get the first Scott Frost that, coached this UCF team back then? That's definitely a big question mark, but you look at this roster, really no major weaknesses on both sides of the football, maybe except for the offensive line. They don't have a ton of depth there, and they're going to have plenty of options at quarterback as well. But, there's going to be a lot of new players, a lot of new faces on this team that are going to have to really step up this year in 2025. But I think they'll get better and better, and as the season goes on, I think they'll get used to each other, playing with each other alongside, and the schedule does give UCF a chance to definitely make it to a bowl game in 2025. That's why I think this team could be a surprise team. You look at the schedule, again, it's not really quite terrible. Yes, they do play North Carolina in the non-conference, but again, this UCF team, they were 4-8 last year in 2024, so let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this UCF team for 2025. First couple of games of the year, one on Thursday and then here on September 6th. They're pretty easy wins in my opinion for UCF. Jacksonville State here on August 28th, and then you got North Carolina A&T. That's an FCS team, so I think UCF will take care of business in both of these games, and I got this team starting off 2-0 for 2025, and then they actually get their first bye week rather early here in the season. They play North Carolina, though, coming out of the bye week. I think that's actually a pretty good spot for a bye week because you kind of got to get ready for a big Power 4, matchup here against North Carolina here on September 20th. This will be a home game here for the Knights. I think this crowd is actually going to be fired up for this game because you got Bill Belichick taking over here for the Tar Heels. That's obviously the biggest storyline, and I know a lot of people are hyping up this North Carolina team a lot, but I just don't think they're going to be like, a team that's going to contend in the ACC. Yeah, they do have a pretty nice schedule. That's why I got this team going 8-4 this year. But, the problem for North Carolina is the depth. They don't have a ton of depth. Yes, they got a lot of new players coming in from the transfer portal, and that's really the similarity between these two teams. They both have, a lot of new players, and yeah, the depth does worry me for the Tar Heels, and that's why I think UCF is actually going to win this game because they have a ton of more depth, against the North Carolina roster, and I think that's going to be enough here for UCF to get a big win here for Scott Frost in the early part of the season. So I think UCF actually does pull it off. Maybe North Carolina is the better team on the roster and on paper, but I think UCF actually does pull it off here. So I'm going Knights in that one, and that's going to get them to 3-0. Going into conference play the rest of the season here from September 27th all the way to the end of the season on November 29th. They open up Big 12 play, though, on the road at Kansas State on September 27th. Obviously going to be a pretty tough test here for your first conference game after, Scott Frost returning for, a long time. You look at this Kansas State team, it's a pretty tough place to play. I think they're definitely the better roster compared to UCF, and also the first true road test here for UCF. I think that's going to be pretty tough for these new faces to handle, and so I think maybe they give it, Kansas State a slow start, but I think Kansas State overall is the better team at the end of the day. I don't think it will be a blowout, but I'm saying it's going to be like a 14 to 17 point win for the Wildcats. So I'm going Kansas State here in this game. That's going to give UCF their first loss of the year. That's going to get them to 3-1. Then they play at home against Kansas on October 4th. The Jayhawks, I feel like, are going to be a little bit better this year. They're obviously another team that's coming off a disappointing year last year. In fact, UCF and Kansas had the most experienced teams last year in 2024, and they were actually, expected to be dark horse contenders. Well, this year, they're not really expected to be dark horse teams, but you look at this Kansas team again, I think they'll be a little bit better this year, but UCF does get this one at home. I think it's a pretty even matchup. Maybe on paper, the Jayhawks are better, and they're definitely the more well-coached team, but I got to go with UCF here in this game, so I think they get a win here over the Jayhawks, and that's going to now put them at 4-1. Then they go on the road to face Cincinnati here on October the 11th. Cincinnati team that could be a little bit better this year, and definitely a team that's more competitive in some of their big games in the Big 12 this year. And this one's on the road. I think it's a pretty even matchup. You got two teams here, probably with new players on both rosters, but the Bearcats are at home in this one. I think that's going to be the difference. I'm going Cincinnati here in this game to win it, and that's going to give UCF their second loss of the season, so that's now going to put them here at 4-2. And they play at home against West Virginia on October 18th. Obviously, West Virginia also going to be having a first-year head coach. These two rosters are also pretty even, in my opinion. Really, home field advantage is what's going to come down here between these two teams as well. Just like the Cincinnati game, I think this is a pretty even matchup, 50-50 game, flip a coin. I'm going with UCF here to pull off the win, and so that's going to put UCF now here at 5-2. So you're sitting there with 5 wins already going into the final month of the season, but this is kind of where it gets trickier here for UCF. They have a pretty tough schedule here in the month of November. A couple of games on here are pretty winnable, but the 3 games here on the road, these are all going to be tricky games for UCF. Now, they do get a bye week here before playing Baylor on the road on November 1st, but this is a Baylor team that I talked about, time and time again here in these videos of the Big 12. I think this team is going to be really good this year. They have a ton of experience coming back on both sides of the football, and I think they are definitely a top 25 team, and then a potential dark horse team in the Big 12. So yeah, I don't think UCF will have a pretty good shot here to make this a competitive game. I think the Bears win it here by 14 to 17 points. So going Baylor there, that's going to give UCF their 3rd loss of the year, and that's going to put them now here at 5-3. Then they come back at home to face Houston on November 7th. A Houston team that I've already done my prediction not just too long ago, and I did pick UCF here to win this game. This one is on a Friday. Let's kind of pretend that Houston has kind of got a winning streak going under Willie Fritz, and then they come here to UCF to play on the road. And yeah, we've seen a lot of upsets happen here on these weeknight games. I don't really think an upset will likely happen here. It's just what I'm pretending that could happen. Let's say Houston is on a winning streak, and then UCF comes in a little bit fired up, especially after a tough loss to Baylor, and they come in here on a Friday really fired up for this game. And again, a lot of these weeknight games turn into really big time wins, and then also turn into close games. I think it's one of those games here. I think Houston will be a lot better this year. Willie Fritz, of course, in his 2nd year. I think they're actually going to be a lot better, but I got to go with UCF here to win this one because it's on a Friday, and they're also playing at home, so I'm going Knights here in this one. And they go on the road to play Texas Tech on November 15th. Texas Tech team that I think is going to be too much here for UCF. This is going to be a dangerous team, in my opinion. A lot of people are high on this Texas Tech team, including myself. They also added a ton of additions in the transfer portal, but they also have a bunch of experience coming back, and they're kind of similar to Baylor. They could be a top 25 team and a potential dark horse in the Big 12, so I'm going Texas Tech here to win this one, kind of similar to the Baylor game. It's a 14 to 17 point win, not a blowout. I don't think every game in the Big 12 is going to be a blowout. I'd say, the blowout win is probably going to be just by double digits, like 10 to, 19 points, somewhere in that particular range. And then they get Oklahoma State here at home on November 22nd. Oklahoma State team that's also kind of coming off a pretty disappointing year in 2025. Yeah, Mike Gundy is a pretty good coach. He can definitely turn this team around, but I'm not quite as high on the Oklahoma State as I was from last year. Yeah, I think this team is going to take a big drop off. They took a drop last year, but I feel like they're going to take another drop this season. So yeah, UCF playing at home, I think that's really the difference here. Pretty even matchup. I'm going with the Knights here to win this game. So that's going to put them now here at 7-4, going into the final game of the season on the road at BYU on November 29th. obviously going to be a pretty tough game, pretty similar team to Baylor, Texas Tech. These are three really well-experienced teams coming up in the Big 12, along with Arizona State. But you got BYU with now question marks at quarterback. Is Jake Razliff off the team? We don't really know just yet, but I feel like he's already entered the transfer portal as I'm recording this video. But yeah, BYU, I think they'll be fine though. I feel like they're still going to be a pretty good team. I think they'll still be a Big 12 contender, a top contender for that matter. And yeah, I think this will be a closer game probably. When I said in the BYU video, I wasn't really expecting a pretty close game, but now I'm kind of expecting here a close game. UCF where they probably fight hard in the first half, but second half, that's really the difference there. I'm going with the Cougars here to get the win. So I do got UCF closing out the season with a loss to BYU, but I got this team going 7-5 this upcoming season. I think that's a pretty fair prediction. I know they can probably go 6-6 or even 5-7. 5-7 would be respectable because it's a first-year head coach, but Scott Frost has a ton of experience as a coach. I mean, I can see this team, possibly going to a bowl game, and I could see this team right there around 6, 7, 8 wins. Again, you look at the schedule, it does set up pretty well for them, but what if they slip up against North Carolina? It could be a 6-6 year, but I probably wouldn't be surprised if they do pull off one of these road wins. But yeah, Cincinnati, that's probably the only game that I can see them potentially winning and probably getting to 8-4 because Kansas State, Baylor, Texas Tech, and BYU, these are all going to be pretty good teams this year in the Big 12, and I think those are going to be really tough games for UCF to win. But either way, I got this team finishing 7-5 in 2025 for this upcoming season. So that's my prediction here for UCF for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree? Give me your prediction for UCF down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.